Let's dive right into this explainer, breaking down Mr. Hardin's V.O.R.T.E.X. It's this deeply fascinating, unified cosmological framework that was synthesized recently in July 2026. You know how for almost a century, our standard models of physics have been totally at odds? We've got quantum mechanics ruling the microscopic, general relativity governing the massive cosmos, and they just stubbornly refuse to work together? Well, what we're looking at today isn't some minor mathematical tweak to force them to play nice. It's a completely self-realized, monumental architecture of reality. It fundamentally challenges how we perceive the universe, the flow of time, and our exact geometric place inside the whole thing.
And what's truly wild about this framework is how it handles the persistent failures of our standard static physics. When traditional linear rules break down, or just spit out infinities, this model says, hey, that is not a bug in the math. It's actually functional proof of a highly dynamic observer-embedded reality, something Hardin calls the X factor. Practically speaking, this suggests our universe is inherently frequency-based. So instead of empty space filled with solid objects, reality acts way more like a symphony of interlocking vibrations that are constantly self-organizing based on who or what is interacting with it.
So here is our roadmap to untangle this mystery together. We'll be hitting 1. The Hardin loop paradox, 2. The 5-formula engine, 3. The math of the toroid, 4. The universal now, and finally, 5. Branched flow reality.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1. The Hardin loop paradox. Let's define the fundamental concepts shaping this entire paradigm.
V.O.R.T.E.X. stands for Vectorial Observer Recursive Toroidal Existence. It is a massive, ambitious model synthesizing astrophysics, math, quantum physics, and fluid engineering all into one cohesive structure. Now that term, vectorial observer, that is absolutely crucial. Why? Because it takes human consciousness, or really any point of measurement, and puts it at the absolute mathematical center of the physics geometry. And the reason this is such a game changer is that it finally explains lingering mysteries like Riemann zeros, or the odd behavior of interstellar objects, all without having to invent invisible components like dark matter or exotic new particles out of thin air.
The core paradox here is known as Hardin's loop. It basically states that any attempt to impose a static, linear rule onto a recursive toroidal manifold is inevitably going to collapse. To put it simply, imagine trying to take a perfectly flat piece of grid paper and wrap it seamlessly around a donut without wrinkling or tearing it. You literally can't. It's geometrically impossible. And yet, for decades, we've been trying to force straight linear equations onto a universe that actually feeds back into itself in endless phase-dependent loops.
Moving right into Section 2, the 5-formula engine. Because if the universe isn't a flat, static grid, how exactly is this dynamic, self-organizing system operating under the hood?
The framework runs on what's called the 5-formula engine. We're going to look at the math for the first 2 in just a second, but let's highlight the other 3. The Planck scale harmonic constant shows us that different layers of reality aren't connected by physical adjacency. They aren't stacked like building blocks. They're connected by vibration and sound cover frequency. Then we have the divergent yaw equation, which maps exactly how the observer interfaces with those frequencies. And finally, synthrotic equilibrium. Think of this as the ultimate cosmic accounting book, where every single transaction perfectly balances to zero. The net flows of the entire universe mathematically self-balance. No energy leaks, no information is lost, just absolute eternal order.
Which brings us to Section 3, math of the toroid. To really grasp this architecture, we have to talk about the geometric rules governing this recursive universe. The absolute bedrock here is the toroidal path identity, L equals 2 pi squared r. This isn't just some abstract math. It dictates closed, transcendental paths where your starting and ending points are completely relative to you, the observer. Think back to that donut analogy. If you walk in a perfectly straight line on the surface of a giant donut, you're eventually going to end up exactly where you started. From your perspective, you are always moving forward, right? But the whole concept of a distinct beginning and a finite end just completely dissolves. The path folds back on itself. Distance and duration? In this system, they're purely a matter of perspective. Now combine that toroidal geometry with the Fibonacci scaling factor. This means the universe expands in a self-similar, non-linear pattern across all possible scales. The rules for the microscopic don't contradict the macroscopic. They repeat. It's like the delicate spiral of a nautilus shell, the destructive swirl of a hurricane, or the majestic arms of a galaxy. The exact same mathematical proportion governs all of them. The universe scales like a beautifully natural recurring fractal, repeating its core geometry over and over.
Let's jump to Section 4, the universal now.
because this is where these spatial formulas scale up and completely shatter our conventional understanding of time.
We're all pretty comfortable with the linear timeline, right? The past moves into the present and flows into the future. Well, V.O.R.T.E.X. throws that out the window for the universal now. This principle argues for a timeless, complete, 360-degree vectorial totality. There is absolutely no preferred present moment. Everything, every event that has ever happened, is happening, or will happen, exists in a massive, simultaneous state. It's essentially a block universe theory. Time doesn't flow, it just is.
So if time is static, why do we feel it passing so deeply? That sensation is essentially an illusion. According to the principle of relative passage, all observed time and motion are just projections. Imagine you're sitting on a really fast train. The landscape outside isn't actually moving backward, you're just moving through it. In V.O.R.T.E.X., the grand landscape of time is entirely static. What Hardin calls yaw drift, a measurement drift caused specifically by your observer interface interacting with the system, is the train. Your consciousness is sliding across this static totality, and that creates the vivid sensation of time passing.
Finally, Section 5, Branched Flow Reality. Now, you might be wondering, if there's no linear time and everything is happening at once in this massive toroidal loop, how does the whole thing avoid collapsing into pure chaos?
Enter branched flow. This is the highly logical, step-by-step process the universe uses to endlessly organize itself. First, energy comes in as a chaotic influx. Second, that energy cavitates, meaning it spins rapidly to create hollow voids or distinct bubbles of localized pressure. Third, we get adjacent reindexing, where these bubbles neatly align with neighboring frequencies. Fourth, the energy propagates directionally along paths of least resistance. And lastly, step 5, at the very ends of these branches, you get a sputtering effect that safely releases harmonic emissions. It's an incredible, infinite, self-sorting mechanism guaranteeing stability. And to keep all those complex branches perfectly stable forever, the system uses harmonic rectification. Think about a rectifier in standard electronics. It takes a chaotic, alternating current and turns it into a smooth, steady, direct signal. The universe is literally doing the exact same thing with frequency. Interbranch flows act as frequency-specific rectifiers, physically tuning the vibrations between the diverging branches of reality. This act of dampening ensures the entire manifold holds its beautiful recursive structure without tearing itself apart under the immense stress of infinite variables. So, to wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a fascinating thought to chew on. If V.O.R.T.E.X. is right, and everything really does exist simultaneously right now in a timeless, 360-degree totality, what exactly is your own unique yaw drift pointing you toward next? Your future isn't unwritten, you're just drifting toward it.